evening on this wonderful midday summer's evening. This live stream is being presented by the directors of the Gulf Harbour Community Trustee Company Limited. This is a legal entity formed to be the trustee for the original Community Golf Course Maintenance Trust and also to explore potential solutions to the situation here at the Gulf Harbour Golf Course land on behalf of the Gulf Harbour community. Present this evening are the directors of the Gulf Harbour Community Trustee Company. There are four of us: Tanya Rainey, Chris Geddy, Tony Cortegast and myself, Duncan Miller. Joining us this evening will be Phil Wilson, the CEO of Auckland Council, whose support for the community and the trusts that have been established to manage those activities is much appreciated. Phil will be joining us a little later. He has been called in to manage a civil defence situation in town, but he's on his way. So hopefully he will be able to speak to us a little later. Look, I'm going to start by laying out the context for what we are communicating, and then I'm going to ask Chris to speak through some of the legal implications and progress, as well as discuss some commercial implications. Tony will then help us understand the approach and progress with the golf course and all that is required to bring that back to life. We're thankful that Phil has joined us this evening, and so there should be some time for him to speak later and potentially to answer any questions. You can ask questions of us by typing it into the YouTube tool, and we are watching that, and we will lift those out and we will address what we are able to. Tanya will then wrap up our presentation with some next steps, and in particular explain how we'd like to meet with you to listen to your thoughts and feedback on progress. We plan to leave enough time to answer some questions after that. So let's frame the context for our discussion this evening. Having been successful in influencing the decision to publicly notify the November 2023 resource consent application, and then the liquidation of GHCC 2016, and then the upholding of the encumbrance by Auckland Council and the dismissal of the judicial review of the original resource consent process and decision, the community now found itself in a stalemate as we entered the last quarter of 2024. The land was becoming overgrown and presented various health issues, and security and safety were becoming compromised. And so the Gulf Harbour Community Trust, GHCT number 1, was formed in October 2024. And this was created to separate its activities from the very important and distinct activities of KWGS, which had its own mission to maintain its core focus of guardianship of the green spaces. And we've worked hard throughout the year, and through the generosity and time and donations from our volunteers and supporters, the country club land has been consistently maintained to be a safe and healthy green space in our community. However, we found ourselves at a place where there was no obvious intent or plan for the land from the landowner. And in the last quarter of 2024, we began to explore potential solutions. And since KWGS's core purpose is to focus on its core mission of protecting the green space, it was decided that any exploration of solutions or any commercial negotiations that might be necessary should be carried out by a separate and distinct organisation. Therefore, in April 2025, we established a second trust, GHCT number 2, to actively explore the potential options and, with the freedom to include other people from our community and beyond in the endeavour, some of us began exploring options for resolving the stalemate. And look, many people have looked at the potential of what could be done with Gulf Harbour over the last 2 years, and we're aware that there are still developers looking at the possibility of placing residential houses on the green space of Gulf Harbour Country Club. We have also held a number of discussions with philanthropists, with groups of golfers from the USPGA Tour. However, none of these discussions has led to a viable solution for our situation. And those conversations caused us to consider our guiding principles for a viable solution. And they are: 1, the optimum outcome would be for the community to own a controlling stake in the land in perpetuity. Any solution that does not include permanent ownership or a controlling stake leaves us open to a similar thing happening again in the future. Such models exist elsewhere, and long-term community ownership of the land offers many benefits. Through earlier studies carried out by KWGS on the financial viability of re-establishing the Gulf Harbour Country Club Golf Club, we concluded that the golf operation on its own would be unlikely to generate the revenue needed to pay for the re-establishment of the assets required to run a successful golf club, as well as the remediation of the golf course itself. The path ahead involves significant capital cost in order to get everything up and running again, before any revenue can be generated and a sustainable golf operation put in place. Thirdly, and this is very important for us, is that whatever is created should offer substantial local community amenity. The people who engage with whatever is created should not feel as if they do not belong if they do not play golf. And so we want the facilities created with key elements that are accessible to the wider community while still re-establishing what was once and can still be a world-class golf course. I will not list all of the amenities that are in the discussion here, but in the model we are considering, facilities that we envisage being included in the future of the country club would be equally accessible to the community, not just to golfers. They could include a gym, maybe a pool, a brasserie, even a health centre. And finally, we recognise that we would need at least one other partner to enable us to achieve a financially sustainable model for whatever is created, not the least of which is the capital to renovate the golf course. We also determined that transforming Gulf Harbour Country Club into parkland is not a solution. We already sit on the edge of one of the most beautiful regional parks in Auckland, maybe the country, and the council has no intent to add further park maintenance, security and management to its portfolio. However, as part of the master plan process, we are looking at the overall configuration of the golf course land and are assessing opportunities to add wider public benefit aspects than currently exist. Finally, we also concluded that the ideal approach would be to work closely with Auckland Council to ensure that our approach resonated with them and that our vision evolved in a way that could ultimately be supported by both council and the community. So we created a plan, and we have been working on it throughout the last year and to the current time. And I'm really pleased to advise that by September last year, we had all of the building blocks in place for a workable solution for the future of Gulf Harbour Country Club. We call this our Plan A. And as we continue to work on this plan, new possibilities are opening up, and we are continuing to explore what this might mean in terms of a final master plan proposal. At this point, I am sure that it appears that nothing is happening. However, we would like to assure you that a lot is happening. And what we are sharing with you this evening has been preceded by a solid year of work involving hundreds of hours of purposeful and planned action. This evening, we are sharing what we are able to at this point. And as the plan progresses, we will provide you with further updates. I'd now like to hand on to Chris, who will summarise the legal and commercial issues that have been considered and their progress. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Duncan. So I've got 4 issues that I want to run through. The first is to give you a little bit more detail about what the stalemate is that we found ourselves in. The second is to consider in more detail the options that we've been considering. We also need to understand the role of 1543 Capital, who are the first mortgagees, and I'm going to brief you on the status of other legal issues that we've talked about previously. So turning to the stalemate, how's it come about? So the problem that we basically have is this. The first mortgagee, 1543 Private Capital, which as most of you know is a US-based company, is now estimated to be owed somewhere between 55 and 60 million on the first mortgage. And of course that mortgage has been in default for quite a long time, probably a couple of years. There's also debts owing to second and third mortgagees that probably exceed another 10 million. So we can say that right now it's entirely possible that there's some $70 million that are owed on that land. Now, Long River, the landowner, which is the property company of Greg Oliver, does not have the financial ability to repay the first mortgage, let alone the second and third mortgages. And that means that we start to come into a whole lot of issues. So, for example, Greg Oliver has personally guaranteed the first mortgage, and that, of course, is something that he will struggle to pay. In fact, I doubt that he can. Wayne Bailey, who's the sole director of Long River, has personally guaranteed the second mortgage. We don't think that either of those people have the ability to honour their personal guarantees. Now, 1543, the mortgagee, the first mortgagee, despite having the legal ability to have the golf course land sold due to the mortgage being in default, has not taken any action to do so or to require Oliver to honour his personal guarantee. And of course, the reality is that a person who does not meet their personal financial obligations can ultimately be declared bankrupt. So what's the result of the stalemate? The stalemate, which in the worst case could see the golf course land effectively abandoned for years into the future. In a situation where they have a major impact on property values and amenities that we had previously enjoyed. And of course, it has many negative effects on residents, particularly those bordering the golf course. So what do we do? We either do nothing or we take some initiative. And the reality is that the directors of the trustee company, which I'll talk about in a minute, have decided that doing nothing is not an option. We don't believe that it will produce any results, and so we consequently have started to take a number of actions, which I'll talk about in a minute, to get us out of that stalemate. So why have we created some new legal entities? Well, back in April last year, KWGS elected not to be involved in any commercial activities to resolve the stalemate. And therefore we had to have a new structure to take the actions that we're going to talk about. So the structure basically is this. We have what I call the Maintenance Trust. And originally that was called the Gulf Harbour Community Trust number 1. Now we have what I now call the Action Trust, which is Gulf Harbour Community Trust number 2. And the trustee for those two trusts is Gulf Harbour Community Trustee Company Limited. So who are the beneficiaries of those trusts? Well, in all cases, they are exclusively the residents of Gulf Harbour. And it's important to understand that because our intent is always to both communicate and get support from all the residents. And secondly, to ensure, as I'll come to in a minute, that any legal ownership of the community is in the name of those or that trust. It's important to understand that there is no legal liability on beneficiaries. It's simply the fact that you are a beneficiary if you are a resident of the Gulf Harbour region. What we'd like to do is get some of those beneficiaries to become what we've called named beneficiaries. And that would mean that you would be on our mailing list, that you would get regular updates and briefings, and ultimately potential discounts on some of the new public facilities that we're hoping to achieve as part of this whole plan. So look at the options that the community's got. Option 1, do nothing. Well, I've already said we don't think that that is something that the community would find acceptable. We just believe that something has got to happen, and the question is, how do we go about that? Now, from Oliver's point of view, and it's important to appreciate the options that the individual players have got, Oliver wants to maintain the stalemate until the status quo gives up and is prepared to accept any alternative. But that's not what we believe should happen. He's been reported as saying over the years that he doesn't mind if the land sits there for years and years and years, and that's not to the benefit of the community. The second option would be to support some proposal by 1543 and or Oliver to allow the subdivision of some of the land for residential housing or other commercial activity. Now, it's important to appreciate this could come with promises to reinstate the golf course in a new format to allow further houses to be built around the course. This could have a major impact, of course, on some existing properties. However, it would be presented in a way that might be superficially appealing, and that there would be a commitment to reinstate the golf course. It's really important, though, to understand how this could play out. If the community agreed such support and whatever the third party wanted to do, we need to understand the following issues. The first thing is that developers usually create a legal entity for any development. These are typically referred to as special purpose vehicles or SPVs. These vehicles do not have any other assets, and they're established for the purpose of avoiding legal and financial responsibility if a development or commitments related to that development are not financially feasible. In other words, the developer walks away unscathed. And of course, we've seen a lot of this happening over the last few years. Duval is another classic example of a process that's taking place at the moment where people became financially overcommitted, couldn't perform what they said they were going to do, and there's a lot of people being burnt on the way through. So we could well find ourselves in a situation where a developer has the best of intentions to remediate the golf course. They may, however, prove to have insufficient funds to do so. And again, we've seen this. on a lot of occasions recently. And what happens then, inevitably, the creditors then appoint a liquidator. And it's important to realise that a liquidator has no responsibility, no legal responsibility to abide by any agreements the developer has entered into. So we may have got what we thought was a watertight contract to do certain things. They don't have the money, liquidators appointed, and the whole thing starts again. Now, developers also have the habit of using other people's money. And what does that mean? It means that the development is loaded from the beginning with significant debt. And this is precisely what's happened with Greg Oliver. We understand that Oliver contributed minimal, if any, funding towards the purchase of the golf course owning company Long River Investments. The next risk is that the developer's strategy is often to obtain support and consent for their development and then apply to extended scope. And we've seen recently in downtown Viaduct area where originally consent was given for a 6-storey building, and now all of a sudden an application was made to extend it to 10 stories. The issue is that once approval's been given for a subdivision or whatever other commercial interest, and it's supported by the Golf Harbour community, it's much easier for the developer to get approval extended in a way that the community would not support. So I've been personally approached by one developer with respect to such a proposal seeking community support, and we are aware of other developers made similar proposals, in one case direct to 1543. So if there are insufficient funds to complete the development, even though there may be a commitment to that, what happens if the remediated golf course is not financially sustainable? So, for example, it's obvious that building up a new club again is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time, and there'll be some negative cash flow issues that need to be met from any developer or other arrangement that we've been able to enter into. We don't think it's ever likely that a developer would commit to a guarantee to pay for any losses on an in perpetuity basis. So again, the community finds itself in the same position as it is now. An abandoned golf course, whole thing going to rack and ruin again. As I said, there's been a number of recent examples where this has happened with respect to other developments, and we simply do not want that to happen. So it's entirely possible that any agreement with the developer, no matter how good it may sound, carries significant risks for the community. Out of the frying pan, into the fire comes to mind. Now, it is possible that a well-funded and reputable company could seek support from the community for a commercial development in conjunction with golf course remediation and with minimal impact on existing property owners. The company may also be prepared to give substantial and legally binding long-term guarantees to underwrite any subsequent operating losses and working capital requirements. Now, should such a proposal eventuate, obviously the directors of the trustee company would seriously consider such a proposal and seek community input. However, to date, no such proposal is presented or discussed, and personally, I would be very surprised if such a proposal will ever eventuate. So those are the first two options. Do nothing, support something which carries some risk. The option 3, which is the one I want to focus on now, is that we set up structures and financing so that the golf course land can be owned by the Golf Harbour community. This is our preferred option. And the reasons for that are, firstly, that it ensures control. So it provides control and ownership of the land in perpetuity by Golf Harbour residents. It means that those risks that I've just talked about with third parties owning it are taken off the table. So nobody can suddenly say, oh, we're going to renege on something because it's the community that owns the land. But to do that, we've got to realistically accept that we're going to need financial support from third parties. It's not realistic for the community to personally fund the purchase and remediation of the golf course land. So therefore, in order to obtain ownership of the land, we will need to obtain third-party financial support that not only provides funding to purchase the land, but also the capital to remediate the golf course. And to obtain this financial support, some appropriate compatible development on part of the golf course land will be needed. But assuming control of the land can be acquired by the company, control of that development is totally in the hands of the community trust on behalf of the community. The trust would then be in a position to ensure the impact of any development on existing property owners will be minimal, or in the vast majority of cases, nothing at all. Now, I've talked about ongoing revenue requirements. We will run negative cash for a period while we're trying to re-establish the club. So it's important that sufficient funding is provided to not only remediate the golf course, but also to ensure that there is an ongoing revenue stream available to support the course and other community facilities into the future. Now, our financial strategy provides for this and is entirely compatible with the interests of the third parties that we are negotiating with. Golf course remediation strategy. Tony's going to talk shortly on our strategy to remediate the existing course in line with modern golf course design concepts. And there have been many examples of this successfully implemented around the country. Tony will be able to talk about that. Now, Duncan's already talked about new community access and facilities. Now, I just want to re-emphasise that a key component of our strategy is to significantly increase facilities on the golf course land available for public use. Now, that will inevitably see Gulf Harbour as a desirable place to live, will improve property values and the lifestyle that we all hanker after. Now, it's important to appreciate that the financial partners that we have been talking to actively support this strategy. So trustee companies are now pleased to advise that negotiations to obtain the funding to achieve all our strategic objectives are well advanced with third parties and are actively supported by Auckland Council. And that has been a major achievement. And as Duncan has said, there's been a huge amount of work going on behind the scenes over the last 12 months. And this is the position that we now find ourselves in. We are making extremely good progress. I also want to talk about the negotiating with 1543 Capital Partners. We need to look at this from their point of view as well, because when you're entering into any negotiation, you need to understand what the issues are with respect to the other negotiating party. So what could 1543 do? It could, if it wished to do so, call up the debt owed at any time by appointing a receiver or exercising its power of sale under the Property Law Act and the mortgage. Commencing the mortgagee sale process specified in the Property Law Act would be one way of achieving this, as would appointing a receiver. But they haven't done that. Now let's talk about the issues that flow from that. So there's not going to be, in my view, any community support for something that allows a developer in to control the land such that a new subdivision or whatever else the commercial development might be. But it's unlikely in our view that any developer will be able to obtain the support that the community would need to give for this to occur. So 1543 have got that hanging around their neck. Similarly, the 990-year encumbrance. Now, I think most people are aware that the 990-year encumbrance restricting use of the land to a golf course and country club is in place, and this can only be changed by agreement between the council and the landowner. Remediation cost is another issue for 1543. Our preliminary cost estimate, and I stress that it is just a preliminary cost estimate, is 15 million, and it may well be more to restore the land and golf course. And of course, that doesn't take into account the additional facilities, clubhouses, etc., that we have talked about. Our plan does, and it means that in terms of the funding that we believe that we've worked towards, and we will shortly be able to announce, we'll achieve both of those things. So we'll have enough funds to purchase the golf course land, remediate the golf course, and improve or replace the facilities plus additional community assets. The other issue that 1543 has is that because they're an overseas company, there are Overseas Investment Act issues that could impact on them once a mortgagee sale process is commenced. And of course, the other key thing is that any sale of the golf course to a third party is unlikely to be at a price that 1543 would cover their $60 million odd. It's simply not worth that. So any loss on the mortgagee debt would have a negative impact on 1543's investors and potentially on 1543's management fees. So it will be necessary for us to persuade 1543 that their interests are best served by reaching an agreement with the trust that results in the trust owning or controlling the golf course land in perpetuity. To the extent possible, we need to take into account the issues that I've just talked about that 1543 face. Whether we can do that or not at this stage, we don't know. So during 2026, The corporate trustee, that's the directors of the corporate trustee, we propose to enter into negotiations in conjunction with our third-party financial partners. And I could advise that as late as this afternoon, it appears as though we have been successful in organising such a meeting. We will be able to comment further on that at a later date. If negotiations 1543 are unsuccessful, there are legal actions against Long River Investments that we could take that might force the issue. We've identified several actions planned in this regard. Now, one of those actions, and I think I've talked about this before, is the tort of legal nuisance. And the legal nuisance following the closure of the golf course comprises a number of things. So, for example, property prices, as you all know, have been financially impacted by the closing of the golf course. Some property owners have suffered detrimental health conditions. Squatters and vandals have been operating on the land. Dirt bike riders speeding up the golf pathways at the same time as residents are walking on those pathways will sooner or later result in serious injury. Fires lit on the golf course could get out of control and cause significant damage to properties bordering the golf course. So that is an action that we are still keeping in our back pocket should we need to do so. So the big question is, can we succeed in our strategy to achieve community ownership of the golf course land? In terms of discussions we have had with potential funders, we believe there is a very good chance of doing so, and that improves daily. Ultimately, however, it is 1543 who will determine what happens with the land. It's up to us as a community to persuade 1543 that community ownership of the land is likely to provide the best commercial outcome for them, and that doing nothing is not a good commercial option. Now, the fourth point is other legal issues that I can just cover off. There's not a huge amount to update on that, but the council, as you know, had a sorry, let me go back a step. The first one was the statutory demand that 2016 GHCTC 2016 made by the liquidators of 2016. So that's been lodged, and it's for approximately $60,000, which is not a huge sum. Unfortunately, during my absence overseas last year, not much appears to have happened in the interim, and I will be following up on this over the next few weeks. Council demolition claim against Long River, and Phil might like to comment on this later, but the court case instituted by the council against Long River to recover the clubhouse demolition costs of around $250,000 was partially heard in August last year, and I understand there will be a further hearing in April of this year. So that's not going to result in something within the next few weeks. It's still some time away. Now, I want to talk about some personal liabilities. So I don't know whether you recall or not, but when we went through the disputes tribunal hearings, one of the liquidators determined that Bailey, who was the sole director of Long River, was personally liable for $17,000 in one case and another few thousand in another. So that means that, in theory, we could now, because we own that debt, that means that we could pursue that against Bailey personally. And that may be a benefit because as the sole director of Long River, he's in a rather tenuous position. The other issue, of course, is that Long River continues to be traded even though it is clearly insolvent. Both of these issues will be pursued, but it's fair to say that complaints to MBIE concerning the activities of Mr. Oliver when he was banned as a director have not been progressed by MBIE, and they are generally pretty useless and undertaking investigations into what I believe are well within their legal mandate and well documented. We will try again, but that may or may not come to fruition. So in concluding this update, I need to refer to the many rumours about potential purchases of the golf course and statements of a legal nature that are circulating in the community. I think we're aware of most of these and can assure you that they either have no substance or in some cases are just plainly legally incorrect. Anyone wishing to discuss any matter is welcome to contact me or any of the other trustee company directors. So if you're hearing stuff that you think, I don't know whether I think that's true or not, it may not be. In fact, it probably isn't. So please contact us if you want what's really going on. Now I'm going to hand over to Tony Portagast, and Tony will give us a summary of providing a briefing on the golf course renovation strategy.
Oh, hello everyone. By way of introduction, I'm a geotechnical and environmental engineer, and I've got over 50 years of engineering experience with Tonkin and Taylor. You may know our firm. We're part of the Penlink Construction Group. I live on the golf course, and in recent years was responsible for the successful fundraising and implementation of the upgrade of 6 holes at the Omaha Golf Club. I've been fortunate enough over my life to play many of the world's great courses. The course we have here at Gulf Harbour in its prime was as good as any, and it has the potential to be even better. As many will know, the Gulf Harbour course was designed by American designer Robert Trent Jones Jr. and it opened in 1997. It hosted the World Cup of Golf in 1998 as well as 2 New Zealand Opens. At the time, it was the jewel in the crown of the integrated Gulf Harbour development. However, since the late 1990s, Gulf Harbour Country Club has struggled to find a stable club-based operating model, and ownership of the property changed several times, ultimately ending up with Greg Oliver, who clearly had no intention of maintaining the facility in anything like its then current form. And we all know the rest of the story. In part, this progressive decline in fortunes was the outcome of restricted road access, something that will now quite soon be overcome with the completion of Penlink. In a couple of years' time, the course will be less than a 30-minute drive from the CBD and the North Shore. That's a game changer. Since the 1990s, the game of golf has also changed, and changed quite significantly. The Trust has teamed with a leading New Zealand golf design expert who is supporting us in assessing the best way to renovate the golf course. As you will know, and as Chris has touched on, the golf course land is protected by a 999-year encumbrance, and Auckland Council, as party to that encumbrance, on behalf of the Gulf Harbour community, is supporting us in upholding it and finding a new pathway. That new future needs to be based on a more modern golf course design, building on the great bones we still have. The course terrain is challenging, but the vistas and enjoyment factor are world class. As Duncan and Chris have said, the future is based on community ownership of the golf course land. We need to take the capital value of the underlying land asset off the table and give the operation the capacity to succeed as a mix of conventional club membership and green fee revenue, much like Muriwai or TRI. Improved access from the motorway will really help that model. The course has great bones, but it's now heavily degraded. It has suffered from a lack of maintenance for many years. Just look at the car parts, for example. We face a complete restart on irrigation, and all the greens and fairways and the bulk of the rough and boundary areas also need attention. The primary facilities have been trashed or allowed to become so by the previous owner. We also know the original course was expensive to maintain. The bunkers were a prime example. The irrigation system is now old and degraded, and the previous owner has scalped value from anything he could lay his hands on to sell. We will start the planning process with a full condition assessment of the course and a review of the course layout. Originally, this was fitted to the existing topography, and our aim is to come up with a course layout that appeals to today's player, but that is less punishing to the average golfer. And that's not to say it still can't have plenty of teeth. Our aim is simply to modernise the facility, as well as it making it more enjoyable to play and less expensive to maintain. As part of this, we will also want to work with other stakeholders and revegetate peripheral areas of the course with native planting to integrate with the wider greening initiatives that are being undertaken on the Whangaparaoa Peninsula. Now, this reset presents quite a lot of opportunity. As I mentioned earlier, we are fortunate to have on board a leading New Zealand designer who is thrilled to be involved in this project. He is firmly of the view that the Back to the Future model will not work here. We need to and can create something quite unique. So we need to look at what we have and explore the possibilities. The outcomes we are seeking can be summarised as a modern, player-friendly, technical and enjoyable golf course with world-class views, of course. Ultimately, we must deliver a rebuilt or reconfigured 18-hole course along with new and updated practice facilities. There are some great models that we are looking at, but to achieve this, something has to give. And as Chris has mentioned, in this case, it's part of the driving range area. Otherwise, commercially, it just can't be made to work. Our aim is to make the new course better than the old. Aspects of it may look a bit different. There are likely to be fewer bunkers, but more mounds and grass bunker and waste areas, all aimed at enhancing the course while reducing maintenance costs. Once we secure ownership of the land, we will work through an optioneering exercise with our course consultant to come up with a layout that we are confident the community will support. Where opportunity presents itself, we may look at repurposing peripheral areas of land for other public access uses, where this can be done without clashing with golf. This could include opportunities for activities such as dog walking and cycling, which many members of the public have become used to accessing since the course closed a few years ago. Once we've developed the proposed master plan, we will bring this to the community for consideration. To summarise, our aims regarding the golf course can be summed up as, firstly, with the support of Auckland Council, vesting the golf course land in permanent ownership of the Gulf Harbour community and developing a financial model for the future that is robust and ensures long-term success. Secondly, redesign and rebuild the golf course based on its current bones to provide a modern world-class facility that is playable by golfers of all abilities. And lastly, to provide appropriately scaled, modern golf 19th hole and practice facilities that set us up for the next 50 to 100 years. As we know, we have the bones for something truly great, and I think the prospects are very exciting. We hope you will support us as we work towards achieving this outcome. And as Chris has said, if you have ideas or you hear rumours, please contact us and we're happy to put those all into the mix. I'd now like to hand over to Phil Wilson, the CEO of Auckland Council, who's been kind enough to join us tonight, and despite a very busy day, I understand, Phil, with the weather. And Phil, as Chris has mentioned, has been very supportive in giving us counsel as we've been working on this plan. So thank you again, Phil, for joining us tonight.
Well, good evening, everyone. And as Tony said, the weather's pretty ugly out there, and I hope everyone's fine. Look, I'm here to lend support and, if you like, help explore what a sustainable solution is. And you've heard some of the ideas around that now. I want to say a few things to you as a community, if I might. I'll start by actually just thanking everyone who's been involved in the two trusts directly, but more broadly the community who have picked up the mantle of responsibility in terms of some level of maintenance and obviously have a pretty active interest in what's been happening and what could happen with this land. Secondly, council, as others have observed, is pretty fully involved and engaged in this discussion. That's at an officials level, and I've got staff, including Rachel Kelleher, our Director of Community, who's online listening to this tonight, and a range of others, but also importantly our elected members, both locally in terms of the local board, your local councillors, the Mayor and others. Have discussed this and have given me a formal mandate to engage with these folk and explore what these options might look like and what the implications might be for council in this regard. That was important to do. So we've, as a consequence of that, been actively working with folk. I do have to be careful. Council wears a number of hats here. We need to respect the private property interests of the owner to a degree. We need to, in good conscience, consider any development proposals and such like. But make no mistake, we share the community's concern about the state that this land is in, what the implications are for the community, for property prices, for degradation, if you like, of amenity in the area, and so on. And therefore, again, we want to help find a sustainable solution. Now, that starts with clearly upholding the encumbrance on the land that council is party to. and we've taken steps to assert what the encumbrance means and what both council and acting on the community's behalf, what the community would be likely to accept and want in that regard. And it's not widespread development and degradation of the green space, clearly. Now, council is open to exactly how this happens. I mean, the durable solution that we're looking for might come in a number of ways, and good on the folk that you've listened to tonight for exploring what that might look like. We're a little bit agnostic about what it might look like, but clearly it's got to pass a test in terms of acceptability to the community, and that's what we're sort of keeping an eye on. Absolutely, there is support for the notion of a community led interest in this, ownership of the property, the future governance and stewardship of this. You know, frankly, I think that's a very good model to keep it community centred, to have the community sort of very actively involved in the future stewardship of it. Almost a bottom line, if you like. We are also interested in some aspects of this, and including, you know, what's the public amenity here? What's the dividend that might apply in terms of you know, public access, be it walking paths, cycling, and other things that people have mentioned. You know, and there's a hope, frankly, that there is both a golf outcome and a broader community outcome to be achieved here, and worth exploring. Look, you know, I suppose the final thing I'll just finish on is to say, you know, we've had a number of our own communications with the owner, with that interest. Frankly, there isn't a dialogue or a relationship there. We haven't found that company to be particularly responsive. I'm not begging them, I'm just observing the reality of the situation. And so, you know, were it possible to have worked through some of this in a direct fashion, then we might have been able to do that. But as it is, I'm very supportive. We are very supportive, again, of the trust in terms of pursuing this this option. I'll leave it there. Happy to come in later and help answer any questions insofar as council's concerned. I'm handing to Tanya, I believe.
Thank you very much. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight. As everyone here knows, anything that happens on the Gulf Harbour Country Club land really matters. It matters deeply to the people who live here, who walk it, who look out over it, and who care about its future. That's exactly why so much work has gone into getting us to this point. What we've shared with you tonight, what we're calling Plan A, is not something that came together quickly or casually. It represents more than a year of focused effort, including over 10 months of weekly meetings and countless additional hours behind the scenes. We've worked through complex detail, engaged with third parties, and operated under confidentiality where required, because we wanted to be responsible and careful rather than add to speculation or rumour. This isn't the final plan, and our next step is to meet with you in smaller groups such as residents' associations, clubs, or groups of neighbours, where we can have real conversations, answer your questions, and hear your ideas. We'll look to do this over the next month or so. We may hold a larger public meeting later, but for now, meaningful discussion is our focus. We'll also be sharing documents on our website soon. Gulf Harbour Community Trust now has its own website and social media at www.ghct.nz, and we hope to be on Instagram soon. This is completely separate from KWGS, who we respect and support in continuing their role as guardians of the green space. We'll use social media for updates, but not for debate. So if you have questions, please email us and we'll do our best to respond within 48 hours. Now, a quick word on funding. We sincerely appreciate the support that you've shown us so far. We don't have wealthy backers, and many of us have funded this work ourselves. Your donations have allowed us to keep maintaining the land, managing pest plants, mowing, keeping the areas safe, as well as to continue our legal efforts. At the moment, we have enough funding to keep things running until around the end of March, but ongoing support is still going to be needed. So to summarise, Plan A keeps the land in community control permanently. It guarantees strong community amenities. It is financially viable. It has Auckland Council support, and it enables a sustainable golf operation. We'd really love to hear from you. If you'd like us to meet with your group, please email comms@ghct.nz and address it to me, Tanya. I'll repeat that email address, comms@ghct.nz. Thank you for submitting questions when you registered, and we hope that we have managed to answer most of them for you. There is one question that has come in for Phil, which I'll ask now. Phil, what can be done to get the council to enforce the landowner to maintain the land as a green space for use as a golf course?
Look, I will take that away and give it further consideration, but just in simple terms to start with, make no mistake, the council has asserted the requirements that flow from the encumbrance to the owner. That's not just in general terms, but specifically that the land is for golf purposes and should be operated as such. So that's been our starting point, to assert that in writing with the owner. Now, yes, there's a question then of what legal follow-up, what options might be available to the council now to further assert that. I think that's probably a question not so much for a public forum, because it goes to, if you like, legal strategy and our responsibility as a regulator and a party to the encumbrance. So I just give an undertaking that we'll follow up on that. There was another part, wasn't there? You mentioned the pest species.
Yeah. So currently the land is overrun by pest plants, which is spreading to neighbouring properties.
Yeah, so I am aware of that. Community members have made us aware of that, and some steps have been taken in that regard. But I know it's a widespread problem, alongside others. You know, the freedom camping and the vandalism and so on. So again, we've put some requirements on the owner without a lot of success. There are options that we might explore to follow up on that further. I just, not to absolve ourselves of responsibility to follow up, but I do know the community's put a lot of energy in itself to control those weed species. So just to express some gratitude for the local responsibility that's been taken.
That's great. Thank you, Phil, very much for your time this evening, and thank you everyone for your time on this midweek summer evening. Very wet evening. Take care.